fuse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention, a kingdom for a stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold the swelling scene. Then should the warlike Harry, like himself, assume the port of Mars, and at his heels, leashed in like hounds, should famine, sword, and fire crouch for employment. But pardon, and gentles all, the flat unraised spirit that have dared on this unworthy scaffold to bring forth so great an object. Can this cockpit hold the vasty fields of France? Or may we cram within this wooden O the very casques that did affright the air at Agincourt? O pardon, since a crooked figure may attest in little place 1,000,000, and let us, ciphers to this great accompt, on your imaginary forces work. Suppose, within the girdle of these walls are now confined 2 mighty monarchies, whose high, upreared, and abutting fronts the perilous narrow ocean parts asunder. Pierce out our imperfections with your thoughts, into 1,000 parts divide on man, and make imaginary puissance. Think, when we talk of horses, that you see them, printing their proud hoofs in the receiving earth, for 'tis your thoughts that now must deck our kings, carry them here and there, jumping o'er times, turning the accomplishment of many years into an hourglass. For the which supply, admit me chorus to this history, who, prologue-like, your humble patience pray, gently to hear, kindly to judge our play.
Once more unto the breach, dear friends, once more, or close the wall up with our English dead. In peace, there's nothing so becomes a man as modest stillness and humility. But when the blast of war blows in our ears, the imitate and action of a tiger stiffen the sinews, summon up the blood, disguise fair nature with hard-favoured rage, then lend the eye a terrible aspect. Now set the teeth and stretch the nostril wide, hold hard the breath and bend up every spirit to his full height. On, you noblest English! Be copy now to men of grosser blood, and teach them how to war. And you, good yeoman, whose limbs were made in England, show us here the mettle of your pasture, let us swear. Then you are worth your breeding, which I doubt not, for there is none of you so mean and base, that hath not noble lustre in their eyes. I see you stand like greyhounds in the slips, straining up the start. The game's afoot, follow your spirit, and upon the charge, cry, God for Harry, England, and St. George!
In Othello, the character Emilia, who has growing concern at Othello's behaviour towards his wife Desdemona, expresses this worldly wise view to her blameless and trusting mistress. But I do think it is their husbands' faults if wives do fall. Say that they slack their duties and pour our treasures into foreign laps, or else break out in peevish jealousies, throwing restraint upon us. Or say they strike us, or scant our former having in despite. Why, we have galls, and though we have some grace, yet have we some revenge. Let husbands know their wives have sense like them. They see and smell, and have their palates both for sweet and sour, as husbands have. What is it that they do when they change us for others? Is it sport? I think it is. And doth affection breed it? I think it doth. Is't frailty that thus errs? it is so too. And have not we affections, desires for sport, and frailty, as men have? Then let them use us well, else let them know the ills we do, their ills instruct us so.
COVID-19, as far as we know, was not endemic in Shakespeare's day, although of course they had their own plague. If it had been, I wonder what William would have made of it.
Othello, or Tragedy Averted? The suspicious and touchy Othello, a jealous and credulous fella, smothered his wife and extinguished her life by means of a feather-filled pillar. But if there had been a lockdown embargo on travel to Cyprus, then Iago could never have sailed. His plot would have failed and averted the fateful farrago.
This is a short extract from the final scene of A Midsummer Night's Dream. The mechanicals are about to perform the most lamentable comedy and cruel death of Pyramus and Thisbe. Tom Snout, the tinker, explains that he is to play the part of a wall. The photograph is from a production of The Dream that I was involved in at the RSC in 2016. In this same interlude, it doth befall that I, one Snout by name, present a wall, and such a wall as I would have you think that had in it a crannied hole or chink, through which the lovers, Pyramus and Thisbe, did whisper often, very secretly. This loam, this rough cast, and this stone does show that I am that same wall. The truth is so. And this the cranny is, right and sinister, through which the fearful lovers are to whisper.
This is from Henry VI, Part 3. Henry is not a warrior. He leaves that to his virago of a wife. But as his side is losing the Battle of Towton, Henry reflects on the simpler pleasures of a shepherd's life compared with the insecurity of kingship. O God, methinks it were a happy life to be no better than a homely swain, to sit upon a hill as I do now, to carve out dials quaintly, point by point, thereby to see the minutes how they run, how many hours bring about the day, how many days will finish up the year, how many years a mortal man may live. So minutes, hours, days, months, and years, passed over to the end they were created, would bring white hairs unto a quiet grave. Ah, what a life were this, how sweet, how lovely! Gives not the hawthorn bush a sweeter shade to shepherds looking on their silly sheep than doth a rich embroidered canopy to kings that fear their subjects' treachery? Oh, yes, it doth, 1,000-fold it doth. And to conclude, the shepherd's homely curds, his cold thin drink out of his leather bottle, his wonted sleep under a fresh tree's shade, all which, secure and sweetly he enjoys, is far beyond a prince's delicates, his viands sparkling in a golden cup, his body couched in a curious bed, when care, mistrust, and treason wait on him. These are the economic consequences in the reign of a weak king, or woe to that land that is ruled by a child. This is with reference, of course, to the Wars of the Roses and the reign of Henry VI. The houses of York and Lancaster battled for who should be master. The crown whizzed to and fro, Henry VI let it go and plunged England into disaster. In the ensuing financial collapse, just as in our own days perhaps, the treasury fell like a rock down a well. The value of sterling went flat. And if, in King Henry's weak reign, COVID was not really to blame, there was nonetheless monetary distress and all-round financial pain. When sick, it said Shakespeare read Ovid. It made him feel better. He loathed it. If today he'd been smitten, I'm sure he'd have written a poem rhyming Ovid with COVID.
A good sheriff's sack hath a twofold operation in it. It ascends me into the brain, dries me there all the foolish and dull and curdy vapours which environ it, makes it apprehensive, quick, forgative, full of nimble, fiery, and delectable shapes, which, delivered o'er to the voice, the tongue, which is the birth, becomes excellent wit. The second property of your excellent sheriffs is the warming of the blood, which, before cold and settled, left the liver white and pale, which is the badge of pusillanimity and cowardice. But the sheriffs warms it, and makes it course from the innards to the parts extreme. It illumineth the face, which, as a beacon, gives warning to all the rest of this little kingdom, man to arm. And then the vital commoners and inland petty spirits muster me all to their captain, the heart, who, great and puffed up with this retinue, doth any deed of courage, and this valour comes of sheriffs. Hereof comes it that Prince Harry is valiant, for the cold blood he did naturally inherit of his father. He hath, like lean, sterile, and bare land, manured, husbanded, and tilled with excellent endeavour of drinking good and good store of fertile sheriffs, that he has become very hot and valiant. If I had 1,000 sons, the first humane principle I would teach them should be to forswear thin potations and to addict themselves to sack.
The death of Falstaff, or a life gloriously spent. Would Falstaff have brooked isolation to avoid the risk of contagion? By nature gregarious, his friends many and various, he'd have found it a massive frustration. But the fat knight, as far as we know, did not die of corona, although he was obese and boozy and fond of the floozies. The company he favoured was low. He died in his bed in the end, his huge life gloriously spent, his heart broken in two by Henry V, who was obliged to renounce his old friend.
Julius Caesar Act 2, Scene 1. As the Ides of March dawns, Brutus has just been visited by the conspirators. He is now alone, and as he wrestles with his thoughts, Portia, his wife, arrives and pleads with him to share his dark secret. You have ungently, Brutus, stole from my bed, and yesternight at supper you suddenly arose and walked about, musing and sighing with your arms across. And when I asked you what the matter was, you stared upon me with ungentle looks. I urged you further. Then you stretched your head and too impatiently stamped with your foot. Yet I insisted, yet you answered not. but with an angry wafture of your hand gave me sign for me to leave you. So I did, fearing to strengthen that impatience which seemed too much enkindled, and withal hoping it was but an effect of humour, which sometime hath his hour with every man. Dear my lord, make me acquainted with your cause of grief. Upon my knees I charm you, by my once commended beauty, by all your vows of love, and that great vow which did incorporate and make us one, that you unfold to me, yourself, your half, why you are heavy. And what men tonight have had resort to you, for here have been some 6 or 7 who did hide their faces even from darkness. Within the bond of marriage, tell me, Brutus, is it accepted I should know no secrets that appertain to you? Am I yourself but as it were in sort of limitation, to keep with you at meals, comfort your bed, and talk to you sometimes? Dwell I but in the suburbs of your good pleasure? If it be no more, Portia is Brutus' harlot, not his wife. I grant I am a woman, but withal a woman that Lord Brutus took to wife. I grant I am a woman, but withal a woman well reputed, Cato's daughter. Tell me your counsels, I will not disclose them. I have made strong proof of my constancy, giving myself a voluntary wound here in the thigh. Can I bear that with patience, and not my husband's secrets?
One of Margot Macleary's ditties. Julius Caesar lives to a ripe old age. In the city of ancient Rome, Julius Caesar was working from home. His one walk a day went the opposite way, and he took it, of course, quite alone. The conspirators' plot was distorted, their plans irreparably thwarted. To their annoyance and shame, the Ides of March came, and the date, unremarked, then departed.
Where the bee sucks are words sung by Ariel in The Tempest, but it also fitted very well with the fairy music in Trinity Players' production of A Midsummer Night's Dream in 2018, when we sang to the musical setting by Thomas Arne. Where the bee sucks, there suck I, in a cowslip's bell I lie, there I couch when owls do cry, when owls do cry, when owls do cry. On the bat's back I do fly, after summer, merrily, merrily, after summer, merrily. Merrily, merrily shall I live now, under the blossom that hangs on the bough. Merrily, merrily shall I live now, under the blossom that hangs on the bough, under the blossom that hangs on the bough.
When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy contented least. Yet in these thoughts myself almost despising, haply I think on thee, and then my state, like to the lark at break of day arising, from sullen earth sings hymns at heaven's gate. For thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings.
From The Merchant of Venice. The Jewish moneylender Shylock insists that Antonio's unpaid debt is redeemed by forfeiting a pound of flesh, as agreed. Portia, whose husband was the cause of his friend Antonio's debt, knows that Shylock has a watertight case and, disguised as a male lawyer, addresses the court. The quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed. It blesseth him that gives and him that takes. 'Tis mightiest in the mightiest. It becomes the throned monarch better than his crown. His sceptre shows the force of temporal power, the attribute to awe and majesty wherein doth sit the dread and fear of kings. But mercy is above this sceptred sway. It is enthroned in the hearts of kings. It is an attribute to God himself. And earthly power doth then show likest gods when mercy seasons justice. Therefore, Jew, though justice be thy plea, consider this, that in the course of justice none of us should see salvation. We do pray for mercy. And that same prayer doth teach us all to render the deeds of mercy. I have spoke thus much to mitigate the justice of thy plea, which, if thou follow, this strict court of Venice must needs give sentence 'gainst the merchant there.
The Merchant of Venice, or Shortage of Medical Protection. Antonio, the Merchant of Venice, lost his case on the obvious premise he couldn't pay, to his sorrow, the ducats he'd borrowed, so fell foul of old Shylock's menace. It was Portia who got out of this mess, saying, although the merchant confessed that corona advisors say a mask and a visor are essential before you cut flesh, and as PPE is lacking, Shylock, you're allowed to get cracking, but you must also wear a net over your hair. And thus thwarted, he was sent packing.
Live with me and be my love, and we will all the pleasures prove that hills and valleys, dales and fields, and all the craggy mountains yields. There we will sit upon the rocks and see the shepherds feed their flocks, by shallow rivers, by whose falls melodious birds sing madrigals. There will I make thee a bed of roses, with 1,000 fragrant posies, a cap of flowers and a kirtle, embroidered all with leaves of myrtle, a belt of straw and ivy buds, with coral clasps and amber studs. And if these pleasures may thee move, then live with me and be my love. And that the world and love were young, and truth in every shepherd's tongue, these pretty pleasures might me move, to live with thee and be thy love.
This is one of the most famous soliloquies from Hamlet. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them. To die, to sleep, no more, and by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished,
To die, to sleep perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub, for in that sleep of death what dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil must give us pause. There's the respect that makes calamity of so long life. For who would bear the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely, the pangs of despised love, the law's delay, the insolence of office, and the spurns that patient merit of the unworthy takes, when he himself might his quietus make with a bare bodkin? Who would fardels bear to grunt and sweat under a weary life, but that the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country, from whose bourne no traveller returns, puzzles the will and makes us rather bear those ills we have than fly to others that we know not of. Thus conscience does make cowards of us all. And thus the native hue of resolution is sicklied o'er with the pale cast of thought, and enterprises of great pith and moment with this regard their currents turn awry and lose the name of action.
Queen Margaret, from Henry VI, Part 3. The House of Lancaster has been victorious at the Battle of Wakefield, and Queen Margaret, wife of Henry VI, mocks the captured Duke of York, who dubs her the she-wolf of France. Clifford, Northumberland, come, make him stand upon this molehill here, that wrought at mountains with outstretched arms, yet parted but the shadow with his hand. What? Was it you that would be England's king? Where are your mess of sons to back you now, The wanton Edward and the lusty George? Oh, and where's that valiant crook-backed prodigy, Dicky, your boy, that with his grumbling voice was wont to cheer his dad in mutinies? Or, with the rest, where is your darling Rutland? Look, York, I stained this napkin with the blood that valiant Clifford with his rapier's point made issue from the bosom of the boy. And if thine eyes can water for his death, I give thee this to dry thy cheeks withal. Alas, poor York! But that I hate thee deadly, I should lament thy miserable state. I prithee grieve to make me merry, York. What? Hath thy fiery heart so parched thine entrails that not a tear can fall for Rutland's death? Oh, why art thou patient, man? Thou shouldst be mad. And I, to make thee mad, do mock thee thus. Oh, York cannot speak unless he wears a crown for York, and lords, bow low to him. Hold you his hands while I do set it on. Ay, marry, sir, now looks he like a king. But how is it that great Plantagenet is crowned so soon, and broke his solemn oath? As I bethink me, you should not be king till our King Henry has shook hands with death. And will you pale your head in Henry's glory, and rob his temples of the diadem now, in his life? against your holy oath. Oh, 'tis a fault too unpardonable. Off with the crown, and with the crown his head. Off with his head, and set it on York gates, so York may overlook the town of York.
Fear no more the heat of the sun, nor the furious winter's rages. Thou thy worldly task hast done, home art gone, and taken thy wages. Golden lads and girls all must, as chimney sweepers, come to dust. Fear no more the frown of the great, thou art past the tyrant's stroke. Care no more to clothe and eat, to thee the reed is as the oak. The sceptre, learning, physic must all follow this, and come to dust. Fear no more the lightning flash, nor the all-dreaded thunderstone. Fear not slander, censure rash. Thou hast finished joy and moan. All lovers young, all lovers must consign to thee and come to dust. No exorciser harm thee, nor no witchcraft charm thee. Ghost unlaid forbear thee, nothing ill come near thee. Quiet consummation have, and renowned be thy grave.
Julius Caesar, Act 3, Scene 2, Rome, the Forum. Mark Antony's oration at the funeral in honour of Julius Caesar, who has been assassinated by members of the Senate, afraid that Caesar may proclaim himself a king. Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. The evil that men do lives after them. The good is oft interred with their bones. So let it be with Caesar. The noble Brutus hath told you Caesar was ambitious. If it were so, it was a grievous fault, and grievously hath Caesar answered it. Here, under leave of Brutus and the rest, for Brutus is an honourable man, so are they all honourable men. Come I to speak at Caesar's funeral. He was my friend, faithful and just to me, but Brutus says he was ambitious, and Brutus is an honourable man. He hath brought many captives home to Rome, whose ransoms did the generous coffers fill. Did this in Caesar seem ambitious? When that the poor have cried, Caesar hath wept, ambition should be made of sterner stuff. Yet Brutus says he was ambitious, and Brutus is an honourable man. You all did see that on the Lupercal I thrice presented him a kingly crown, which he did thrice refuse. Was this ambitious? Yet Brutus says he was ambitious, and sure he is an honourable man. I speak not to disapprove what Brutus spoke, but here I am to speak what I do know. You all did love him once, not without cause. What cause withholds you then to mourn for him? O judgment, thou'rt fled to brutish beasts, and men have lost their reason. Bear with me, my heart is in the coffin there with Caesar, and I must pause till it come back to me.
The poem Spring at the end of Love's Labour's Lost. When daisies pied and violets blue, and lady smocks all silver white, and cuckoo buds of yellow hue do paint the meadows with delight. The cuckoo then on every tree mocks married men, for thus sings he, Cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo. O word of fear, unpleasing to a married ear. When shepherds pipe on oaten straws, and merry larks are ploughmen's clocks, when turtles tread, and rooks and daws, and maidens bleach their summer smocks, the cuckoo then on every tree mocks married men, for thus sings he, Cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo. O word of fear, unpleasing to a married ear.
When icicles hang by the wall, and Dick the shepherd blows his nail, and Tom bears logs into the hall, and milk comes frozen home in pail, when blood is nipped and ways be foul, then nightly sings the staring owl, to wit, to woo, a merry note. When all aloud the wind doth blow, and coughing drowns the parson's saw, and birds sit brooding in the snow, and Marion's nose looks red and raw, when roasted crabs hiss in the bowl, then nightly sings the staring owl, to wit, to woo, a merry note, while greasy Joan doth keel the pot.
The raven himself is hoarse, that croaks the fatal entrance of Duncan under my battlements. Come, you spirits that tend on mortal thoughts, unsex me here, and fill me from the crown to the toe top full of direst cruelty. Make thick my blood, stop up the access and passage to remorse, that no compunctious visitings of nature shake my fell purpose, nor keep peace between the effect in it. Come to my woman's breasts, and take my milk for gall, you murdering ministers, wherever in your sightless substances you wait on nature's mischief. Come, thick night, and pull thee in the dunnest smoke of hell, that my keen knife see not the wound it makes, nor heaven peep through the blanket of the dark to cry, Hold! Hold!
When that I was but a little tiny boy, with a hey-ho, the wind and the rain, the foolish thing was but a toy, for the rain it raineth every day. With a hey-ho, the wind and the rain, for the rain it raineth every day. When I came to man's estate, with a hey-ho, the wind and the rain, against thieves and knaves men shut their gate, for the rain it raineth every day. With a hey-ho, the wind and the rain, for the rain it raineth every day. When I came at last to wife, with a hey-ho, the wind and the rain, my swaggering never could I thrive, for the rain it raineth every day. With a hey-ho, the wind and the rain, the rain it raineth every day. saw one, our playing is done, and we'll strive to please you every day.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear William. Happy birthday to you.